Thank you for joining tonight. I'm Keith Boswell, the Vice President of Marketing here at ADHD Online, and I am very excited to be hosting a panel tonight with three of our esteemed colleagues. We'll give it just about one more minute and then we'll get started. Just one piece of housekeeping. You can submit questions tonight through the Q&A feature down at the bottom of the Zoom panel. So if you are hovering over the screen, you can see a small Q&A function. You can add your questions there and we'll be happy to take those. Again, we'll get started in just 1 second. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us tonight. All right. Well, we're here tonight to talk about COVID and relationships and ADHD. I think one of the interesting things that has come out of COVID is the distance that it's put between all of us. And the numbers are quite clear that the ADHD community has been hit at a higher rate than the general population. And so isolation and distancing have affected everyone, but in particular, it seems to be hitting the ADHD community. Our group of experts tonight is going to discuss ways to maintain and strengthen relationships when it might feel impossible. So we want to talk about all relationships. This is friends, family, professional, romantic, and even your relationship as a parent. So again, if you have questions you'd like our panel to tackle, please submit them. You can put them in the Q&A down at the bottom, and we'll do our best to get as many of them as we can. I want to go around real quick before we start with the questions and just introduce everyone that's here tonight. Again, I'm the host, the moderator, Keith Boswell, the Vice President of Marketing here at ADHD Online. We're joined by Terry Matlin. Terry is a licensed master social worker and an internationally recognized expert on ADHD and women. She's also a psychotherapist, an author, a consultant, and a coach. She's written an award-winning book called The Queens of Distraction and Survival Tips for Women with ADHD. She also runs a website called ADD Consults, and it's a fantastic resource that we highly recommend. We're also joined by Dr. Rafia Mohammed. Dr. Mohammed is a board certified in general preventative medicine and public health. She completed her internship in general surgery at Brookdale University Hospital and Medical Center, and then general preventative medicine and public health residency at the Texas Department of State Health Services. In addition, she has a Master of Public Health from Benedictine University. And Dr. Mohammed joined ADHD Online in August of 2020. Finally, we've got Dr. Gail Jensen-Savoy. She's been completing assessments with ADHD Online since 2018. In 2021, she was named the Division Chief of Psychology for ADHD Online. She has an extensive background working in the mental health field and currently the field director of the Hospital Psychiatric Services for the Joint Commission. So welcome to our panel. I'd like to thank you all for being here tonight, and maybe just have each of you kind of go around and help set the stage for this evening. So Terry, why don't we start with you? Just kind of a general setup about relationships and what we're going to be talking about.
Sure. Well, since I work a lot with women and moms with ADHD, I'm going to kind of focus a little bit on that for now. And I'd say that women, traditionally, there's been some changes over the years, but not a whole lot, still take on a lot of the responsibility of caring for their family, the children, making sure that the kids are getting their homework done, they have their doctor's appointments, social activities, and even beyond parenting is just setting the tone in the family. So with COVID hitting, the women that I've been working with have had a really, really tough time in juggling all of their responsibilities, working. Many women are working full time. And so now they're thrown, especially when we had lockdowns, they're thrown in the home environment with children many times who have their own needs, which is, going to school virtually. So I can't emphasize enough how difficult it's been the last 2 years for moms and women. But I would like to add one little thing is that I also hear from women, especially inattentive women, inattentive ADHD subtype, who found that being home was kind of a relief because they didn't have to make decisions about, well, what do I have to wear? Or what present do I have to get for this wedding? And how do I travel from one town to the other to get to some kind of event? So there is that aspect too. But I think across the board, many, if not most women are now getting pretty fatigued by this whole thing that concerns us with COVID and how we interact with each other and parenting and our partners and our bosses. So that's the women's version.
Great. Thanks, Terry. All right, Dr. Mohammed, what about you?
Yes, so at ADHD online, we see I see kids and adults who have ADHD, and just hearing kind of what brought them to us, like why are they seeking treatment now? Like some people, the pandemic really has brought that on. Most of them say that I've had these symptoms before, but because of the pandemic, it's just things have just heightened. I feel like I'm being stretched in every possible way, and it just truly shows that how people's structure, their inner day-to-day like routine has changed. And as Terry was saying, women tend to be the glue that kind of holds a family together, kind of helps moms take care of the kid stuff. They're also doing their work, they're also running the house, they're also just everything kind of goes through them. And then if moms are struggling or dads are struggling, or if kids are struggling, like it affects everybody. It's all, so I think the pandemic, in one way, we're all just one big world. We're all just connected so deeply. And so if you are if you have ADHD, or your partner or your kid has ADHD, it really affects the relationship. It really affects all of relationships, and not just with one another within the family. But if you have ADHD or if your child does, and you're working from home, that can affect your work relationships too, because you could be frustrated or not get things done. So I think it's the way our world is now. We want to make sure that it's just kind of spreading everywhere. So here we want to be able to kind of highlight how ADHD and relationship, how that plays together, and what different either therapy options are there, what different medical managements, and just different things we can all talk about to make sure that we are addressing all aspects.
Great. All right, and then what about you, Dr. Savoy? And then we'll turn to some of the questions.
Good. I think what I've seen in doing all the assessments and reviewing the assessments are people now are saying, I'm not sure, I'm driving my husband crazy, I'm driving my boss crazy. Is it ADD or is it anxiety from this COVID? How do I know if it's anxiety or if it's anxiety and my ADHD? Or I'm so irritable. Is that anxiety? Is that ADHD? Because the world is such a different place now. So I think really the assessment piece has gotten much more complicated because there's so many factors with the COVID and relationships.
Great. All right. Well, I'm going to turn to the first question, and we got this one before it was submitted prior to the event. So this one came in from Julia. She's a teacher with severe ADD and ADHD, and she wanted to ask if you have any advice for teachers and for people who suffer from ADHD. How do we stay organized ourselves? It's affected my teaching and schoolwork terribly. Is there something I can do for myself and my students? I feel I've let them down and let myself down.
Could I just take a broad hit on this thing? And I think we have to frame all of this, no matter what is being difficult for us, is taking a step back and recognizing we're living through a time that's never been seen before in our generations, that we have to be kinder to ourselves, to allow ourselves to maybe not do the best that we can, as if, like in earlier days, that we have to be more gentle and accept that we have to get through a day as best we can. So I just want to kind of throw that out there as a beginning thought with
That's great.
many of us who are being so hard on ourselves, and the people that I work with, sort of what this teacher is saying, why can't I be more organized? How do I? Well, I think we have to just begin with take a deep breath and acknowledge these are hard times.
Mhm.
I think that's really
Yeah.
important because I don't think we tell each other that enough,
Yeah.
right? Just acknowledging it. And it
Yeah.
kind of
I
goes
know.
to what you were saying, Dr. Savoy.
And as we say to everybody, I say, this is my first pandemic. Maybe the next time you'll know better how to deal with it. But
Yes.
this is my first
Yes.
pandemic, and it's your first pandemic. And so,
Yeah.
looking at how can we really give ourselves that permission to look
Mhm.
at things differently, and especially for folks with ADHD, maybe what they have been doing to manage their symptoms is not going to work now because everybody else, it could be anxiety, depression, or something, or people are having much more difficult time controlling their behavior. So giving themselves, the teachers, the parents, the coworkers, just that break that you don't have to keep doing it, and what you've been doing may not work. You may have to change that.
Yeah. I would kind of, approach this question with, times are changing. School is not the same anymore. So as a teacher, I want to ask a little bit more as to, what grade is she teaching? Is it because teaching elementary kids is different than high school kids or a college professor, that kind of thing? And then is it, teaching in a virtual model is very different than a hybrid model or in person. In person, there's that we're still in a pandemic, so that scare of like, am I safe? Are my kids safe? Just the public health safety there. But if it's virtual, then it's very different because you are, in a sense, you're by yourself, but you have to engage all these kids, whether if it's younger kids, then they have a little, you just sing songs with them like on Zoom. Someone has internet issues and it kind of messes up everything. So I think teaching has changed a lot. So I would I think it's not about having ADHD or depression, anxiety, or anything of that sort. It's just how can we help make teaching more? This is different now. No one really knows what to do or how to kind of approach it. So I would really ask, kind of take a step back and reassess and kind of see, is it the curriculum where you need to be organized, or is it more how to manage a hybrid model or virtual model, like that kind of thing?
All right, well, I'm going to turn to the Q&A now. We got a question in from Rebecca related to school and behavior and IEPs. So she asked, my son is getting in trouble at school for blurting out and being disruptive. He's getting behavior slips and he's on an IEP. Is there anything I can do to help the school see that his behavior is not intentional and more so due to his ADHD? And this kind of gets to that, like, managing the awareness of ADHD.
I can take a stab at it because my daughter, who's now a young woman, had an IEP her entire school life. And I ran into a lot of problems with staff teachers who didn't understand that her behaviors were not deliberate. It was due to her ADHD and her other issues. I think that you can, as a parent, you're part of the IEP team. So you can request all kinds of services, like in-services for the teachers, to teach them, well, how does ADHD look like? What does it look like in a child with ADHD? I mean, let me reframe that. Let me start over. What does ADHD look like in a student in the classroom? So if he's getting into trouble, you might want to also ask for, and I can't remember the exact term, maybe some of my other panel members will, but it's like a behavioral assessment. And you can request of your special education director or the school social worker or the school psychologist to, and I wish I knew the exact name of this thing, but to have the child assess like what will work, what won't work. So in my daughter's case, back when she was younger, they would have things like visual cues. Like if she couldn't sit still, these are the things that the teacher can do with the child, or if she had a parapro, to, have a lot of times where she could get up and walk around to get rid of some of that excess energy and hyperactive behavior. So I think the important thing really is to remember you are part of the IEP team. Don't let them scare you and say, oh, no, we can't do that, or we don't have it in the budget to get your child assessed by the school social worker or whatever.
Great. All right, I'm going to go to the next one then. So the next question's from an anonymous attendee. She said, I'm a mother of 2 young children, 1 and 3. The past 2 years have been nothing short of excruciating because we've been home as a family of 4 with little to no contact with outsiders. As time passes, I cannot seem to establish and keep a schedule that meets the need of everyone in the house. What practical advice can you offer moms who don't have the option to bring in outside help yet?
I can try taking this one. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and but yeah, a busy household and during a pandemic is just it's so different now when you have little kids running around all the time. I I work from home, so I see patients in my dining room sometimes, and my husband works in this room sometimes. So we're all it's so our world has just this has become our world, and trying to create a schedule for the kids has been hard, just because when they're young they have nap times are different. If they and their kind of eating times are different. I would recommend sticking to a schedule as much as you can. In a sense, make sure they go to bed at the same time, which will ensure that they wake up at pretty around the same time every day. And then if they're still young, so they may have a nap in the afternoon, so I would time things around those naps, and then around their sleeping, napping, and then the bedtime routine. I like to start mine usually like an hour earlier. We do like showers. We sometimes try to make bath time a little bit more fun. We have popsicle party in the bathtub, which just means a bubble bath, and we have a little bit of some popsicles in there, just to kind of make it so that, one, it tires them out, and second, if they make a mess in the tub, it's okay. And then so those sort of things. And then I also during the times where they are up, if you want to kind of make more interactive play stuff, so maybe have a small Play-Doh station, or have maybe some finger painting, that kind of thing, but contain it, of course. So maybe if it's nice outside where you live, maybe just have it outside or indoors, but I would really stick to their bedtime as main milestones, and create a structure around that.
That makes sense.
I'd like to jump in and just add a little bit to that. I'm guessing that this mom has ADHD. I don't know if she said that or not in her question, but I'm assuming. So I'm going to just guess that she does. And what might help is adults and kids her kids are too young to, well, maybe with pictures it would work, but visual cues are so helpful. And it can be done with little children with just pictures, but for the mom, she might have a chart in the kitchen or some area where the whole family can see it, and sort of structure her day. Sort of like what Dr. Muhammad said, bedtime is this time, bath time is this time, but for the whole day, so that she at least has something to hang on to, where it's not just a complete crazy mixed up kind of day.
Yeah. Great. All right, well, let's move on to the next one. We got a question from Cindy. What are some other mental health issues that go hand in hand with ADHD? And I think, it's not directly about relationships, but I think it teases at the kind of all the things that are in play for someone mentally that is dealing with ADHD.
I can take some of that. About 80% of people with ADHD have some other mental health diagnosis. The 2 most common are anxiety and depression. So, that's what you're really going to look at. And I think when you look at relationships, those are big issues. If you're ADD and you have anxiety, not only are you worried about what may or may not happen due to the anxiety, but you're also worried about you're distracted and maybe not being able to pay attention to the relationship. The same with depression. If you have ADHD, you may feel guilty because of the whole world, but then you might feel guilty too, as a child, because you've run over, and broke your mother's best vase or something. And so you feel guilty about that. So yes, I think the two largest diagnosis, most common seen diagnosis with ADHD is anxiety and depression. And then all the anxieties that go with it, OCD, etc.
Great. All right, well, let's go to the next question. This one came in from an anonymous source. Can you talk about the ways object permanence, impulsivity, and hyperfocus can impact relationships, and how to have healthy romantic relationships with all of these tendencies and things to juggle?
That must come from a therapist. What were the, other than object permanence, what were the other parts?
Object permanence, impulsivity, and hyperfocus.
And can you read the question again?
Yeah.
How do
Yeah,
they
so
have
can
those
you
three
talk
parts?
about the ways object permanence, impulsivity, and hyperfocus can impact relationships, and how to have healthy romantic relationships with those tendencies in play?
Well, I'll take a stab at it. I know that object permanence, when I was in graduate school a zillion years ago, was more about kids, and when they learned that when mama leaves the room, mama comes home. So I'm not sure the context of this in adulthood. Maybe someone else could address that. But with hyperfocus and impulsivity, that can really impact relationships, because if you're impulsive, you're not in the moment. Impulsivity is you're distracted and you jump without thinking. So if you want to establish a healthy relationship with your partner or whomever, the impulsivity piece needs to be addressed. And generally that, as our team knows, it's generally through medication and some sort of therapy, and even some coaches can help with that kind of behavior, impulsivity. Hyperfocus, now that's an interesting one, because now that's kind of almost the opposite of impulsivity, but it can also backfire, I would think. I'm just kind of thinking freely about hyperfocus. So if you have, let's say, a hobby, or you love TV, or whatever activity it is, and you are spending a tremendous amount of time, you don't realize, and we have a problem, people, and I have ADHD, I understand that there's like what they call time blindness. Time just kind of runs off without you realizing it. So if you're watching your favorite show, you may not realize that 3 hours have passed. Or if you're on your computer on social media, on whatever, you may not realize that hours and hours have gone by, and someone is in the house with you that wants your attention, whether it's a partner or a child or whomever. So we have to really learn about how does I think that's the bigger picture. How does ADHD impact us, whether it's during COVID or not? COVID makes it much more difficult, as we've talked about it before, but so hyperfocus is really being a little bit more, or quite a bit more self-aware. How does this affect the people around you? And how can you control your hyperfocus? And that becomes a bigger question. And anyone wants to jump in on that?
I guess I was taking it from the one relationship, Terry, of if you've got ADHD and a romantic relationship, if the object's permanent, are they going to really come back if they leave me and go to the store? And impulsively, I want to go find, search and maybe check up on them. And then you spend all your time focusing on that relationship. So I guess with me, it would really be about having some therapy as a couple, or working on your relationship as a couple. And I think with COVID, because all of those would happen, you're not so sure if they leave, are they coming back, are they getting ill, are they being exposed, hyper focusing, again on that relationship, because it might be just the two of you at home. So really working on how do you have a healthy relationship with boundaries and ADHD, and being able to separate it. So that was like, I took it a little different. Dr. Muhammad, maybe something else.
So I think the hyperfocus, the impulsivity, those are very commonly seen in ADHD, more of the combined type. So you have this, inattentiveness, where you can't seem to focus on one thing long enough to actually complete it, whether it's a task or if it's someone's story in a sense. So if your partner's telling you something, you're listening, but you're not listening. That not listening part can be tied into like this mental hyperactivity where you have a lot of tabs open in your brain. So as kids, we see hyperactivity as bouncing off the walls, and they're kind of, they can't sit still. But as adults, we know we can't do that. It's rude to walk away if someone's talking to you. So you take these mental like hikes in your mind in a sense. So if someone's talking to you, you just kind of, you're listening, but you're physically there, but you're thinking, oh, wait, did I do this? Did I do that? Did I put the dishes away? Like because I think, again, we're all home now. So there's a lot of, there isn't a division between, your work life, your home life, your, personal, your time to yourself. So if you're talking to your spouse or your partner, you may also be thinking, did I put the dishes away? Did I get the groceries? Did I order this? So the other person may feel like, oh, you're not listening to me. I'm not important to you, that kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of this, the inattentiveness, that hyperactivity or hyper focusing on something else may make the other person feel like they're not important, they're not loved, or, at the same time, you could all be ready to watch a movie and, and it's like, well, if you're in the kitchen, can you go get me some popcorn or something? On my way there, I may forget about the popcorn, but pick up 4 other, little Lego pieces off the floor, or be like, oh, what is this sticky thing? Start cleaning things. And I come back and it's like, where's popcorn? I'm like, oh, forgot, I'll be right back. So that in one, that's something really simple, but if that happens a lot, then the other person may just feel like, you don't care what I say, you don't care about me. And these sort of, and, I think, and the pandemic, like, again, during this time, any little bit of time that we spend with each other, we want it to be good, because otherwise you spend a lot of time at work and, seeing just kind of away from your family. So I think healthier, creating healthy habits is one, but also kind of having opening communication, saying that, look, I hear what you're saying, but I'm thinking of 4 other things that I really need to do. And then kind of opening it up, being like, hey, can you either help me with the kids with this task, or, I really need 10 minutes to myself to really finish these emails so I can, close these tabs in my mind and I can focus on you. Another thing I always tell my patients is to have closed loop communication. We have this a lot in medicine, especially if you're running a code or something, but it's like, so if someone says something to me, I'm going to say it right back. So if I'm in the kitchen and and if someone tells me, hey, can you give me some chips? I'll say, you want some chips? I will bring the chips. Like, you sort of repeat it back to them. So I know it's been said, and in some weird way that kind of keeps me accountable. So I think communication is very important, and again, sometimes it's like you don't even know you're doing things, and that's another part of ADHD. You sometimes don't know the you focus on the wrong thing. You're like, well, you focus on like, well, I'm sorry if I didn't like maybe the drink wasn't cold or something. Like, you focus on the really, really minute random detail, but then you forget the bigger ones, So I think open communication is important, so that way the other person feels like they're more like feels more loved and more respected.
Great. All right. I'm going to go to the next question. And this is kind of like the big one, because this is kind of when people have reached the breaking point. So this one's from Aurora. She says, do you see a lot of divorces as a result of one of the people in a couple having ADHD? My husband and I are getting a divorce after 18 years. We're older. My ADD has affected how we communicate, and he doesn't want to be together. He gets angry when I can't focus and doesn't think I really have ADHD.
What I'm hearing is both sides of this. I'm hearing of more couples, yes, getting divorced because they're trapped in the same house for now 2 years, and they're getting on each other's nerves, and they're maybe seeing parts of their partner's personality that maybe didn't bother them before. But I'm also hearing of couples saying that they are enriching their relationship, that they're learning more about their partner in a positive way, that things, it's the same kind of thing, but opposite, in that, well, I never really thought much about this kind of behavior that I'm seeing now that I'm with him or her. they, a lot. So I'm seeing both, but I am hearing about plenty of divorces, and I hope it's not too late for, is it Aurora?
Aurora.
Aurora, to see if there's a way to, if you say that you're older, I'm assuming that you've been together for, well, after 18 years, that's quite a bit of time. Maybe it's not too late. Maybe it's worth consulting with a couples therapist to see if there's a way to repair this relationship.
I've been seeing a lot of, again, this time we're all living together. You don't, you are getting to know each other in a different light. And I see some people coming in. It's because I asked my patients, so what brings you to see us today? Like, why seek treatment now? That kind of question. And most of them are like, well, I knew I was like this, but my wife told me to come in here because she can't stand it that I can't do this, or wife will be like, well, my kids can't stand it because I keep asking the same thing so many times. So that kind of thing, so it's, so I think from a couple's perspective, I see a lot of, it's kind of like they hit the breaking point and they're like, well, I need to get help because I didn't know it was so bad, that kind of thing. I've had some couples who are on the verge of getting divorced or are in the process of divorce, and they, throughout the, once they're on the medication, their symptoms are better managed. They kind of have this moment where they're like, oh, that's what that's what was happening. Oh, now I understand. Like, I see how annoying I was. Oh my gosh. And it just makes them understand, it's not just, I think people's idea of ADHD is when you're kids, it's like this, but when you're adult, it affects so many different aspects of one's life. So I see a little bit of both.
That's great. Okay, that's very helpful. So good luck, Aurora. We wish you the best.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we've got a question from Jeff. He says, do you have any advice for new parents with adult ADHD? I have 2.5-year-old twins who don't often have daycare due to COVID, and it's been hard to work while they're home. It's hard for me to work in general as I've never established good habits or routine, but this has compounded my difficulty. I have a newfound basic understanding of ADHD, and I'm exploring all my options on managing my ADHD as a new parent in a new job.
Well, 2.5-year-old twins. Go ahead.
I was just going to punt it to you, Terry, so that was good. I would say, 2.5-year-old twins. I think that's difficult with or without ADHD as a parent. I really think if you've managed your ADHD pretty well, this brings a whole new aspect. So someone like Terry, who's an ADHD coach, I think in that way could really benefit. So I was going to punt it to you, Terry. So go ahead.
It's not clear to me whether, Jeff, if you're getting treatment yet for your ADHD, but I would say if not, it sounds like you are learning about it. You're trying to figure out how to manage it. But I would say before anything is to, first of all, read more. And it sounds like you are, though, learning more about how ADHD affects adults. That's number one. Number two is, if you haven't already been formally diagnosed and treated, that would be number two. Make sure that you're reaching out to professionals who know how to help you, whether it's medication, counseling, therapy, coaching, of course. The other part to this is, well, I said it earlier that we're living in these very difficult times, and we have to kind of take a step back and recognize that life is hard right now for everybody. But you having 2.5-year-old twins, and I think you said something about a new job, you have a lot going on in your life. So you need to reach out and get support. I would wonder how much support you're getting from your partner, and where else you're reaching out. It's hard, I know, with times that we're having right now, but there's a lot of online support groups through, like Attitude Magazine has all kinds of groups going on. CHADD.org, they have support groups going on, ADD.org. And Facebook, I run actually a couple of groups that are popular. I do tend to gear more towards women's issues, but if you do a search on adult ADHD, you'll find a lot of groups out there on Facebook and other social media. So I would say, don't do it alone. Take a step back, take a deep breath. And with 2.5-year-olds, even without COVID, I think I would be on the floor. It would be
Yeah,
really
yeah.
hard for me to deal with. But so, accept that it's a difficult time, regardless of what's going on in the world
Yeah.
today, and give yourself some slack, and know that the children, they just need your presence right now. They need to know that you're there for them, that you're giving them their needs that are being taken care of.
Mhm.
For you to be here tonight tells me that you are a father who really does care. So
Mhm.
right off the bat, I'd say that you are a very caring, loving, supportive parent, and give
Mhm.
yourself a little pat on the back for that.
Yeah. Terry, that's a really great point. I often have to even remind myself to not try to be the Hollywood dad,
Yeah.
right? That we have this image of what we're supposed to be and what we aspire to, and sometimes we'll knock ourselves out just trying. And
Mhm.
so, that to let that compound and add to things, just it's something you kind of have to be able to let go of and just enjoy being a parent. So,
I would just add a bit to that, saying that when you become first time parents, or just have newborns in the house, it really messes with your sleep schedule. No one tells you how much sleep you will lose, and you have to all of a sudden do everything, but with very little sleep. So I think that in itself can be really difficult with whether you have ADHD or not. But there's some medications, that are more longer acting. So if your sleep cycle has been disrupted, if you feel like you're not able to get a good night's rest and you're taking a long acting medication, that may really affect your sleep cycle moving forward. So I would recommend following up with your provider to see if there are medications that could, that if there's a way to modify medication, so that way you are able to use it when you in a sense need it. Because with kids, you may have only a little bit of pockets of time during the day. So if that's how your day to day is now, if that's how your schedule is, then there are medications to kind of help you through that. So I would recommend following up with your doctor.
great. All right, I'm going to go to the next question. Shannon expresses something I think all of us can relate to. So she says, I've been relieved to not have to look good, drive, go to big social events during COVID. I enjoy my quiet time during the day while everyone's at school. I've even enjoyed not being able to travel as much, partially because flying makes me anxious and travel exhausts me. But then I realize I'm feeling lonely and or disconnected to friends, family, community. Online stuff helps, but in person is what I really think I need. Any suggestions?
If I can jump in on that one, I could have written that question. Because I have the inattentive subtype, which means I'm fine with not socializing to some degree. And I enjoy my quiet time and not having to figure out what to wear and how do I come off, professionally in person. But you have a really good point that you're hungry for a social interaction. And it's hard because there are restrictions. If we're going to stay safe, we have to follow certain guidelines to keep us and others safe. I don't know where you live. If you're in an area like I am, where it's cold and it's just brutal outside, there's no way that I could hang out with a friend in a park without ending up in the hospital ER with frostbite. So one thing that might help you if online is getting to be too exhausting, which it is for most of us, and meeting someone in person doesn't feel safe, there are ways to meet in person and still be safe. If you're wearing your N95 mask, if you're vaccinated, if there's space in between you, that's still somewhat of an option. It may not be the greatest. And you have to kind of judge for yourself, how willing are you to do these kinds of activities? What's your mental health compared to your physical health? Everyone has to make that decision for themselves. But my thought is to share with you that we get so caught up in what's happening with this pandemic that we forget that this is temporary. And whenever we're in a situation where it feels absolutely awful, no matter what it is, in general, it's a temporary situation and it will get better. So if you can remind yourself that this too will pass, they're already talking about the numbers going down. There's hope that maybe this will be the worst of it now. We don't know. I'm no, scientist.
Mhm.
I don't know. Most of the scientists don't know. But if you can try and just reassure yourself and those around you that life will get back to normal. Maybe a little different, but you will be back with your friends, and just hang in there and find ways to keep yourself busy until then.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, just real quick, we had a couple of people that were kind enough to go back. We had the question about the IEP plan, and someone said it's either a behavior support plan or a behavior intervention support plan. So thank you both for offering that. So we've got another question that came in via the chat. This is a really interesting one that gets to kind of the workplace. As an adult, what kinds of requests can you make for help at work? As it is, my workplace isn't aware of ADHD, and I'm often struggle with feeling like I'm falling behind. So how do you bring up the topic of ADHD at work?
I can start, and I'm sure my panelists, my co-panelists will jump in too. But first of all, I want to start off with, it's not always a great idea to disclose that you have ADHD. Now, I wish I could hear, I'm not an audio person and I can't find the question, but I think the question was, how do I get accommodations at work?
Or what kinds of things can you request for help at work?
Okay, but I want to just, I like to have a backdrop. So first of all, is you don't always want to disclose your ADHD, but you can say to your boss, I have, like, think about the symptoms that affect you the most with your ADHD. If it's distractibility, you can simply say to your boss, I get really distracted when people come in and out of my office because my office is close to the water fountain. You can say, is there a way I can move my office?
Mhm.
Or can I wear headphones? Something like that.
Mhm.
I already forgot the second part of your question. Keith, what was the last part you just said?
But she just said they're not, that her workplace is not aware, and
Not
she
aware.
often struggles feeling like she's falling behind. And it's interesting because then we had another question come in from Emily that's very similar. She's actually waiting on her evaluation results from ADHD online, and she said she's been self-employed since 2015, is considering going back to a traditional job, but is scared that she'll fail. And so she's wondering, are there types of accommodations that are reasonable for adults with
So we
ADHD?
have to be a little bit careful here, because again, if you disclose your ADHD, even though we have federal laws, and this person is in the United States, we have federal laws to protect us from getting into some trouble with our bosses by being
Mhm.
fired or whatever if you disclose your ADHD. Even though we have those laws in place, believe it or not, it's very difficult to win your case. Sad. It's a very sad story. I see it and hear about it all the time. That's why I pose it as, maybe you don't disclose you have ADHD, but you informally request accommodations that you think will help you. So think twice before you say, I have ADHD and I want this and I want that. Again, go by your symptoms. If you're distracted, if you get overwhelmed, if you're
Mhm.
if it's easier for you to follow directions that are audio versus email, just say it to your manager, your boss, whoever. Hey, here's what I would start off with. I really love my job. I want to do the best I can. This is how I can do my best. And then going to, I do much better with email, voice messages, whatever. If you want to go into the formal part of it and go and talk to HR, it's going to be a little trickier for you if you feel that you must disclose your ADHD.
I would also, I mean,
if you ask your boss, tell them, here are my symptoms. I get so distracted, people walking in and out. What do you think would help? People always want to help, and especially bosses. That's why we got to be bosses, because we thought we could tell everybody what to do. I think in that way, then they will often come up with lots of alternatives for you, and then that way, you're not telling them, but you're better able to deal with your symptoms.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I would, I mean, I think the headphones is a great, great modification to add. Like if you, so that way there's less distraction. Also recommend to your boss, and again, communication is very important. Make sure those channels are always open, but then say that, I work best maybe during, if you're able to if you're working remotely, or even if it's like a hybrid model, maybe I could do some things at home, some things in person. Like if you feel like just being in an office space is distracting.
Mhm.
So just asking for those sort of modifications is also important.
Great. Okay. Um, let's see. We got a question about autism, and I'm going to actually we'll table this question, and so we'll follow up with trying to answer it online. But I think given the time, it might be a little too much. So let's see. I just had. Okay, so this one's interesting because I've heard this from other people too. So this was from an anonymous question. Since I can remember, and this was long before COVID too, I've always struggled to make any connections with my peers. I've never really found a place in my peer group, and sometimes I still feel that way. It puts me down a lot. Do you have any advice to cope with this?
There's a really terrific book out. It's a little dated, but I think it's one of the best books I've read about this type of question. And it's called What Does Everybody Know That I Don't? I think that's the correct title. And it's written by Michelle Novotny. It's N like in Nancy, Ovotni, Novotny. And she walks through these kinds of scenarios. If you're an adult with ADHD and you just feel like you can't connect with people socially, you feel awkward, you can't read people's thoughts and feelings. And she will, in this book, really, really be helpful in that way. I can't say enough about that book.
Great. All right. Well, then I'll go to the next question. So we had a question from Shannon, and Terry. This one's a perfect setup for you. So she said, "Can you tell us, please, where we can find an ADHD coach and or a tutor for our children?"
Okay, well, I'm hooked into a lot of coach organizations and directories, and it would probably be best for her to email me so I can give her some recommendations of people I refer out to. I do run an online group for women with ADHD, but it's online on a Facebook platform. So I don't know if that's something you would be interested in. If not, then I can certainly give you some names of coaches. There are so many ADHD coaches out there, and I would be careful and have a lot. There's some great articles online that will give you some ideas on what to ask a potential coach. You want somebody who has had coach training, or there are some therapists who understand ADHD in adults, and they may not need specifically having to have gone through an ADHD coach program. So that's not always necessary. But if you're just looking for an ADD coach, look online for some of these questions to ask. So one is, have you gone through coach training? Do you work with adults? How long have you been working with adults with ADHD? I would really defer you to the internet to get some really specific questions. For tutors, that's a little bit trickier. Like I said earlier, my kids are grown now, but I think you would ask to start with maybe the teachers in your school. They sometimes have great ideas and great connections. And I don't know where you're located, but I'm on a website. I'm always online. It's called nextdoor.com, Next, Nextdoor. And this is where you hook into your neighbors. And since they'll be in the same school district as you, you can just put out there, hey, anybody have good success with a tutor nearby? Who can you recommend?
Great. Thanks, Terry. Let's see. We've got another one. This one's really interesting. So this is from Gary, and I think this is interesting because this is kind of someone trying to help someone they know has ADHD. So Gary says, "I'm a father of 3, dating a wonderful woman with ADHD and 2 younger children. I'm a medical provider and observant of my girlfriend trying to manage her household, job, and motherhood. What are the most important tools to bring to the table to show my support as I become more knowledgeable?"
This is interesting. I'll I'll try this one. I think I think the fact that you are interested, like you are making that step to help or to kind of understand her. I think that is very important. I would I think it would be important to sit down and ask her, be like, hey, how can I help you do so much? What can I do? What, even if something little, something big. And then if you see her doing things that are maybe, it's like you see her maybe, maybe she just loaded the dishes in the dishwasher. Maybe you can, unload them or something. Like see the task that she's doing where she may be taking up a lot of time, or just she keeps doing them repeatedly because forget something or stuff like that, and just kind of pitch in and just try to help her with that, but in a sense, just sorry, I forgot my train of thought. But yes, but I think the main thing is, again, open communication. Also, respecting the fact that she is doing so much, but at the same time, it's you are here to offer that extra set of hands.
And I would say you've done the most important thing already, which is listen and learn. You're wanting to learn what you can do, and the more knowledge, the better. So, as Dr. Muhammad said, asking her what it is that's helpful, but also reading everything you can, talking to other medical providers, getting all the knowledge you can, helps that relationship. So I think you're well on your way to doing a really good job at building your relationship into a solid one.
Great. All right, let's see. Got another question. This one's anonymous. As a female, I've struggled to get a clear diagnosis based on my symptoms. For so long, I had no clue I had ADHD and couldn't see or articulate what was wrong. How can I better advocate for myself now that ADHD Online has given me a diagnosis of the combined type? My psychiatrist requires more testing before prescribing a stimulant. What are some common adult female symptoms I can be on the lookout for to better articulate my needs?
Well, maybe I'll jump in on the, I work with women almost exclusively, not quite. First of all, congratulations. And it's always a weird thing for me to say, congratulations, welcome to the club. I have ADHD. But for many women, it's a relief. It's an explanation for your problems that you've had your whole life. And for I would say the great majority of women that I've worked with for over 20 years now is that they get misdiagnosed. So I'm glad that you finally got your diagnosis. That's what I say, why I say congratulations, because for many of us, me included, there's been misdiagnoses, and generally that's depression or anxiety or both or something else. So moving forward, you're waiting to find out if you can get medication for that. So what can you do for now is to, you're in the beginning stages. So reading is really imperative to better understand what's going on with you. I would recommend a book by Sari Solden, Solden, as a good start. And she talks about life as a woman with ADHD. And she actually changed my life. It's because of that book that I came into this field, actually. The name of the book is Women with Attention Deficit Disorder. So some of the things that she talks about is, and this sounds like a derogatory sort of explanation, but it's being spacey. It's kind of being out there. It's not always being in the moment and taking in what's going on around you, because you might be just thinking about what you did yesterday, thinking about what you're going to do later. It's not being present with whoever it is you're with, even with yourself at times. You're like, you should be doing your work, but you're thinking about something else. So being distracted. If you have combined type, that means that you're inattentive as well as hyperactive and impulsive. It's an interesting, I see more inattentive women generally that I work with, but you have the combined type, which can be, a little tricky. So you might be a little inattentive and distracted, but you're also impulsive at times. So that can create difficulty. Again, when we talk about relationships, maybe it's hard for you to be in the moment with your partner, or with your kids, or with your best friend. And what can you do is going back to the beginning, again, learning about your flavor of ADHD, because no two people with ADHD look alike, and that's important to understand. So what works for somebody else with ADHD may not work for you. So reading, thinking back about your childhood, your teen years, well, what was so difficult for you? And then you'll kind of have your answer right there. And until you get on medication, I would always, consider the idea of counseling or therapy. working with an ADD coach who can help pull you in and help you develop strategies that maybe you never were able to learn growing up or even as an adult. So there's a lot of things open to you now. And I just want to say congratulations for making that move towards figuring out what's been going on with you this whole time.
I would add to that and say that, now, if I understand, I think in the question you mentioned that, did she get her diagnosis through ADHD online?
She did, yeah.
Okay. Well, if it's in a state that we are open for medical management, we'd be happy to see you. So, if you, like I said, if now the next step would be to, find the right treatment options if that's what you are looking for. But the type of ADHD, the combined type, is very interesting in women because there's this component of inattentiveness. Can't focus, can't concentrate on one thing long enough to actually complete it. Then there's this hyperactivity, impulsivity, which presents with, it's not as physical, so you're not bouncing off the walls, but you present with a sort of mental hyperactivity. We have a lot of tabs open in your brain. You can't focus on one tab long enough, and then you jump to the next, and that jumping to the next, that maybe doing something for a little bit and going here, going there, that impulsive, that can also present with this mental hyperactivity and this impulsivity, and this cycle kind of continues. And this can present with symptoms of anxiety, and in turn even lead to just negative self-thought. So a lot of women are diagnosed with anxiety and depression before they're even diagnosed with ADHD, and the symptoms blend in together a lot. And so if the root cause is ADHD, then starting the right medication, having that treatment option which should make everything else feel a little bit better. You feel less anxious. You start getting your things done. You finally tackle that mountain of laundry, and then at that point, these small little things make you feel better. So I would, that's, again, in a nutshell. And as Terry was saying, no one ADHD is the same. So your combined type, so someone else's combined type, it presents very differently. At the same time, with impulsivity, some women I see also have binge eating disorder. Binge eating disorder can also be seen, it kind of this subset of associated with this impulsivity, where it is hyperoral sort of impulsivity and stuff like that. So this is a whole nother topic we can always get into, but if you're in a state where we have medical management, please feel free to come see us.
Great. All right. Well, looking at the time, we probably have time for one or two more questions. And thank you, everyone, for submitting. We've got a lot that we're not going to get to tonight, but we're very glad and thankful for everyone that's asked, and we'll follow up as quickly as we can. So Alex had a question. Any advice for improving a relationship where one party most likely has ADHD but is not formally diagnosed? I find myself becoming easily frustrated when having conversations or trying to communicate information. Knowing what I know now about ADHD, I feel like I should be more patient and understanding, but I cannot seem to practice that in the moment. Well, I can tell you one, Alex, you're not alone in that.
I would say, first off, you're doing a great job because you're recognizing it. And you're recognizing what's going on. And as we've said through the whole webinar tonight, is give yourself a break. In the moment, it is hard. I think if it's something that you really think with your partner, you can suggest the fact that they could get assessed. And maybe they do have ADHD, maybe they do have anxiety, maybe, you don't know, but I think suggesting that to them. And then continue, as we said, of get as much knowledge as you can. There's many books and Instagram, everything on what's it like to be in a relationship with somebody with ADHD. So many tips out there. So get as much knowledge as you can. And if you want to suggest that they be assessed, ADHD online, where I think in every state now, I'm happy to do that.
I think also, just at the end, if you feel like it's something you're losing patience, you're just not able to get your point across, maybe meeting a therapist, having somebody kind of be there as a median, so that way both of you have a safe space to share with each other. what your thoughts are and kind of go from there.
Maybe having a conversation with the partner, like, what do you think is going on, and what sort of difficulty are you maybe having that
Mhm.
I can help you with, or we can work together as a team. Because if this Alex is frustrated, obviously I would think the partner must be frustrated. So let's put our heads together. I want to help you. I want to make our relationship better. Let's talk about, and I think that also helps is when the person, being Alex, might disclose some of the difficulties he has. None of us gets through life without some kind of difficulties. So he might want to share with his partner what he's challenged with and say, hey, this is, and I am wondering if this is affecting our relationship. What about you?
Mhm.
Make it a team effort.
Mhm.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, Terry, I think that's a great way to kind of to end the evening, right? The relationships are all about teams and trying to build things. So, one, I want to thank everyone. Thank all the panel tonight. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Dr. Savoy. Thank you, Dr. Muhammad. Really appreciate you taking the time to answer all the questions. Want to let everyone know the recording of this webinar will be up on our website very soon. We look forward to continuing to do these webinars. We're going to try to be doing them about every 2 to 3 weeks, because we do find there's just tremendous demand for knowledge. And part of our mission here at ADHD Online is to share and give as much back as possible. So thank you all for joining tonight. We'll be following up on all the questions that we couldn't get to. So thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you all again soon.